You betrayed your stepson, and you took his life. You took away everything he was and everything he could ever become. I can't imagine the terror and confusion that he must have felt in the last moments of his life when he knew his life was being taken by someone he trusted to protect it.
Hi, my name is Madison, and you are listening to or watching Who's Knocking, a true crime podcast. I am back. I've been away for 2 weeks. Some of you may have noticed my absence, some of you may have not, but I have been away. I have 3 kids, and each of them got sick one at a time. And now the second one is re-sick, so this might even be coming out later. I don't know. But I'm back, and very pleased to be here. Yeah, also I have really bad allergies, so hopefully I can keep the sniffling to a minimum. We shall see. Today I'm starting a series that is, I don't know how many episodes it's gonna last. I'm really behind, so I'm like doing things as they come, or I'm just putting things out as I do them. I am not ahead on anything in life, so we will see how long this is gonna go. But I think it might be a couple episodes, a few. I think a couple technically means 2 and a few means 3, but I don't know. 3, 4, I don't know. We'll see. So today I begin a series on the murder of 11-year-old Gannon Stauch. This case occurred in the beginning of 2020, and it was only just tried. I watched the whole trial as it happened, and I talked about it in my newsletter, Grim Weekly, and I'm sure many of you are aware of the outcome by now. What I want to dive into in this series is the details, and very specifically the mind and the absolute audacity of murderer Letecia Stauch. We really got to see it all laid out during the trial, and I think that this is a pretty extreme example of like a Casey Anthony level monster. Even if you basically know what happened, unless you're one of those crazy people who spent hours and hours and hours reading and listening to every single detail of this case, I bet you will probably learn something new and very disturbing while watching this. And if you don't, we should probably be friends. Just a very wee warning here. The series discusses the brutal murder of a child. It is extremely disturbing, so only continue watching if that's something that you think that you can handle. Now, there is not a whole lot of very reliable information about Letecia Stauch's childhood. Most of what I could gather was taken from the trial testimony. We do know that Letecia's mother seemed to have really loved her children. According to her son, Dakota Lowry, she was very protective and she did her best for them. It did seem, however, that Deborah maybe did not have the greatest taste in men. Her second husband, James Lowry, who was Dakota's father and Letecia's stepfather, was apparently very abusive. It was alluded to during testimony that James's experience in the military and during his active duty in a war zone were mostly where his behavior came from. Dakota Lowry on the stand alluded to something before he was cut off, because technically he was not allowed to testify to this, but that his mother always said that after he went away to war, he came back a completely changed man. James was a raging alcoholic, and he was physically abusive towards Deborah when he drank, so much so that Deborah would often have to flee with her children to a motel when he was drunk, and they would wait it out there until he sobered up. Now, when Dakota Lowry was on the stand, he testified to a situation in which his father, James, actually fed him so much alcohol that he passed out cold, and Dakota was 3 years old at the time of this. So this is some like deep-seated just craziness. Now, since Gannon's murder, Letecia has come out with many stories about her past and a history of sexual abuse that she claims she suffered earlier in her life. And one of the alleged perpetrators of some of the past sexual abuse was James Lowry, her stepfather. She made claims that he'd raped her and repeatedly sexually abused her. Her claims are completely unsubstantiated, and James is no longer alive to refute those claims. On the stand, Dakota Lowry said that he didn't know anything about any sort of weird or predatory relationship between Letecia and James, and said that if something unsavory sexually had been going on, that he believed he would have known. But it is true that Letecia left home when Dakota was only 2 years old, so it's, difficult to say. Dakota also went on to testify that when Letecia would come back to visit, she would bring knives to give Dakota to protect him from his own father. Clearly, James was a physical threat to the family, but the sexual abuse is the part that we cannot confirm. I think that it is reasonable to conclude that Letecia had a very unstable upbringing, and that almost definitely included some physical abuse and may have included sexual abuse. But the sexual abuse, I don't know. Now, Letecia's educational history is very much up for debate. Letecia has made many claims about her educational history, but most of it has yet to be verified. She did, She did testify in a way that this was all true in a court of law where she would have been under oath, but I think if you watch the trial, a lot of stuff that was said under oath was still questionable. I will take you through what she says is her educational background, as I feel it is pretty relevant. Now, looking at Letecia Stauch's LinkedIn profile, it shows us exactly the levels of education she claims to have completed. Under About on her profile, it says, quote, passionate educator, dedicated researcher, curriculum specialist, education specialist, future ed, I think it's education doctorate, class of 2019, end quote. She is listed that she got her master's degree in curriculum and instruction at Capella University between 2009 and 2011. Now, Capella University is a credible university. It is, however, completely an online school. From 2011 to 2013, she got an education specialist degree in educational leadership and administration from Liberty University. And then from 2013 to 2019, she got her doctorate of education in educational instruction and curriculum supervision, again at Liberty University. Now, both of these schools are officially recognized and accredited by the Higher Learning Commission, and they appear to be real and legitimate learning institutions. Letecia used these degrees to acquire multiple jobs in education, both in South Carolina and in Colorado. She also testified under oath that she earned all of these degrees. However, a lot of people are still skeptical, as there is still no real evidence besides her own word. None of the schools have come out and said that it is true, that she did attend their schools, and I don't know why that would be. Now, why is all of this relevant? Well, maybe it isn't, but I think there are two reasons that it's kind of relevant, her educational history, that is. One, if she is lying about her educational background, it goes towards her history of being a giant liar and manipulator. And two, I think her educational history and her career in education, specifically teaching young children, it made her seem like somebody who could be trusted around children, somebody who you wouldn't have a problem leaving your children with. If you were Gannon's parents, wouldn't the fact that Letecia had worked in education and had over 10 years of education in education make you feel at least somewhat at ease leaving your children in her care? Not that that alone would be enough, but I'm just saying I think it could be a factor. And hopefully I'm not getting too ahead of myself here. For those of you who don't know the story as intimately as I do, that was just a little bit to explain Letecia, who is the perpetrator of our story. Again, it's really hard to get an accurate description of really who Letecia was earlier in her life. I don't think any of her family has really come out to talk about her. We do know that she seemed to be somebody who suffered from at least some sort of anxiety disorder. She was being treated for anxiety at the time. Her brother, again on the stand, alluded to the fact that she like she really liked things to be meticulously clean all the time. Like he said like we thought she had OCD. We do know that Letecia hated her name. She did not like the name Letecia. She liked to go by T. And she either went by T or Tisha. And her kind of nicknames for herself will become relevant in a little while, and probably in a following episode. But she also seemed to be the type of person who she liked to live above her means. This was alluded to by mostly her now ex-husband, Al Stauch. She really looked up to people like the Kardashians and really tried to emulate that lifestyle. And that became a very big mismatch in her life because she didn't have the money for it. So there were a lot of things going on with Letecia near the time of the murder, and I guess leading up to it. I do think it's fair to say she didn't come from a great family situation, and she definitely suffered from some trauma due to that, and some anxiety, as many people do. Now I'm going to get a little bit more into Gannon's family and his parents. So let's talk a little bit about them. Al Stauch is Gannon's father. His real name is actually Eugene Stauch, but he chooses to go by Albert, which I believe is his middle name. Now, it was revealed in the investigation, actually through Letecia, so not sure how reliable this is, that Al goes by Al because he has a very bad association with the name Eugene. I believe it was his father who was also named Eugene, and it's been claimed that Al's father, Eugene, was sexually abusive towards Al, and that is why he goes by Al instead of Eugene. That's Gannon's father. His biological mother, his real mother, is Landon Bullard. And Al and Landon were married, and they had 2 children while living in South Carolina. Gannon, who was born September 29th, 2008, he was born very maturely, and he was super tiny, weighing only 1 pound 6 ounces. And he was apparently only given a 10% chance of survival at birth. But he beat those odds, and he went on to grow up to be a completely normal boy. Now, Gannon also had a younger sister named Lena. Lena was only 8 at the time of Gannon's death, so she was 3 years younger than Gannon. Now, there's a lot of speculation about the split between Al and Landon, and apparently Al and Landon and Letecia all knew each other through some sort of softball league in South Carolina. There had been allegations of cheating on both Al and Landon's parts pre-divorce, but I'm not sure exactly what the situation was. What is clear is that Al and Landon got divorced, and then Al married Letecia pretty quickly after that in 2015. Now, Al and Landon shared custody of their 2 kids for a while, and what their situation was the kids stayed in the family home, and Al and Landon would switch off every other week living in the home with the kids. But that arrangement did not last long. Landon was also remarried, and she remained in South Carolina while Al and Letecia relocated to Colorado Springs, Colorado. The kids were going back and forth for a while until Al was able to get full custody after the divorce was completely settled. It was alleged by Letecia that Landon was a drug addict and was homeless, which is why they got full custody of the kids. Landon has refuted those claims and said that she was not a drug addict or homeless, that she was actually dealing with a very difficult pregnancy with her new husband, and she had to spend a lot of time in the hospital. So Landon had agreed that it would be good for the kids to remain in one location. It's my understanding that this scenario or this setup was supposed to be somewhat temporary. So Al and Letecia were living together with Gannon and Lena, as well as Leticia's 17-year-old daughter, Harley Hunt. Now, who she had from a previous marriage. So she was also a divorcee, by the way. So Al was working in the military at the time. So he was often deployed and gone for months at a time. And in this arrangement, Letecia was left to do all the childcare and also work her full-time job. Now, I discussed some of her educational background before. Her work history was in the educational field. Now, there was some tension between her and Al because Letecia seemed, or according to Al, seemed to like hop from job to job, although her LinkedIn does not really support that. So I'm not sure how true that was or if that was more his perception. However, at the time of Gannon's disappearance, Letecia had just started a new job at a new school, and she was also actively applying for jobs as a flight attendant. Now, it was clear that childcare and Leticia's work was a huge point of contention in Al and Leticia's relationship. Letecia really resented having to take care of the children full time, particularly Gannon and Lena, who were not her children, and who would often talk about missing their real mother because they are children and they missed their mother. Now, there was a point not too long before everything happened in 2020 in which Al had been stationed in Alaska, and he was able to have the whole family come out to Alaska to be with him. And so they went, but Letecia hated every second of it. And the deployment ended after Letecia accused one of Al's colleagues of sexual assault. Now, I don't think that they ever really got to the bottom of these allegations. I think I'd say 99% that they were unfounded and lies. But the whole scenario of these accusations led to like things being way too weird for Al in Alaska working with those colleagues, and so the family moved back to, or I think they started in, I don't know what the series of places they were at, but that's when they moved to Colorado Springs. And I think that most people believe, and I as well believe, that Letecia concocted that whole situation. She made up the allegations so that they could move back because she hated Alaska so much. Now, based on evidence that I will get to later, it is clear that there were a lot of issues between Al and Letecia, and there had been talk of divorce. Now, before I get to exactly what happened here, I want to talk a little bit about Gannon himself. So Gannon Stauch was 11 years old at the time of his death. He was an adorable, innocent 11-year-old child. He loved video games. He had a Nintendo Switch, which he was constantly playing. He loved the character Sonic. Gannon was a nice kid. He did what he was told. He was good to his little sister. He had friends who enjoyed playing outside with him. Gannon had his whole life ahead of him, and there was every reason to believe that he would have gone on to be a contributing member of society, and everybody is worse off after his death. It's always really upsetting to talk about the death of a child, especially as brutally as occurred in this story. And thinking about what could have been, I mean, I can't imagine what things are like for his family, but it's very, very, very upsetting to think about the life that somebody could have lived and all the experiences they never got to have because somebody decided to take their life. I recently said in one of my newsletters that I was not going to be covering deaths of children for a while because I've done a couple and it always really upsets me. But I just think that I've been following this specific case for a really long time, ever since it kind of began unfolding. So I've got a pretty, I'm pretty invested in it. And I think that, a lot of people maybe kind of heard about it, but like the details of it are just brutal. So I'm going to get into the timeline of the events chronologically and tell you what we're dealing with here. Now, it was January of 2020, just after Christmas. Al had been sent out of state to do some training for work, so Letecia was left home with the 3 children. He was sent to Oklahoma. Letecia had just started a new job at a school, and she was literally days into this job. The situation and how she acquired this job was very weird. Through court testimony, we learned that she clearly only barely wanted the job. The employer had to pretty much hound her to get her to agree to take it. And even after she'd taken it, she told the school that she still wanted to go to other job interviews. The school must have been pretty desperate for them to allow this to go on. I think that the woman who hired her alluded to that somebody had just left the position. So clearly they were just trying to get it filled, right? We know that at the time Letecia was looking into flight attendant jobs. So I think that she was probably pretty checked out of her job in education, which I understand. I can't imagine working with classrooms full of children every day. I would check out as well. However, being a flight attendant was clearly never going to work with her home and family life, so we know this was incompatible. On January 26th, Al left for his 2-week training post in Oklahoma. Harley, Letecia's daughter, spent a bunch of time at work. She worked at a place called Massage Envy. This was a massage place. And Letecia took the other 2 kids on a hike at a popular nearby trail called Garden of the Gods. Now, Letecia said that the hike got cut short because Gannon was having stomach issues and wanted to go home. A pretty important side note here. Gannon had suffered from some gastrointestinal problems, which often caused him to have some pretty severe constipation, resulting in some very painful bowel movements and sometimes having accidents, whatever. That's, something that he suffered from. And it was pretty clear that Letecia was often annoyed at this, and she really resented having to deal with this and clean up after Gannon, especially when he would have an accident. Now, this the 26th was also the night of the candle incident, which is a very important incident in this story. I'll tell you about the candle incident. So Letecia's claim was that Gannon had lit a candle and then he knocked it over, I guess, while he was falling asleep. And then a small fire started on their basement carpet and spread onto Gannon, and she smelled something burning and saw smoke, so she ran downstairs, and like a superhero, she used her body to slam on him and put it out. But it was a huge commotion. There was tons of smoke. It smoked up the whole house, and this was a big situation. This fire resulted in some burns on Gannon, which she said got blistery and pussy and even bloody. But then she claimed that they really didn't bother him at all, he was fine. It also made a big burn patch in the carpet, which she decided to fix by cutting out that piece, the burned piece, and then going out the next day to look for a piece to patch it up with. They lived in a new housing development, so she went to another part of the development that was still under construction, and she flagged some guy down and asked him if they had the same carpet and whatever, and I'll get a little bit more into that later. Now, the only reason that we really know that some part of this is true is that there is a recording of a conversation between Letecia and Gannon regarding the situation. It is very upsetting to listen to, so just be warned.
Gannon, I promise this is the last time I'm going to ask you. I'm just freaked out, okay? Are you sure you didn't do it on purpose? I did it. Okay, you promise. You promise. Pinky promise. Okay, all right, so, listen. We're, all right, we're gonna have to sell stuff to fix it, okay? So, we figure out what we gotta sell. We can sell the sofa, we can sell whatever, because we gotta get it fixed, so lady, don't be mad at us and kick us out of the house, okay? You got it? You got it?
I'm just worried about my
Okay, shh, listen.
Now, this video is so weird. She's playing some very weird ass manipulation games, making Gannon believe that because of the burn on the carpet, they were gonna have to sell some of their things to pay for a new carpet, or they would probably get kicked out by the landlord. Like, she's really putting this all on him, which is so weird. And when Gannon is crying and says that he's worried about his burns and is clearly in pain, she shushes him, which is just foul behavior. I don't think I need to go further into why this is so disgusting and manipulative. I think it's very obvious why. And why did she make this recording? That I do not know. That I do not know. I don't know if she accidentally made this recording. That's what I initially thought it was. Or if I see no reason why she made this. I think that she accidentally made this recording and then deleted it, and then it was recovered from her phone later, when they inevitably took her phone. On Monday, January 27th, Letecia said that Gannon was not feeling well and he was having stomach issues. So she said he could stay home from school, and because she didn't want him to be alone, she also stayed home from work. Now, instead of calling into her new job to let them know that one of her children was sick and she needed to stay home with them, something that I assume is pretty normal for like a teacher, Letecia went about it in a little bit of a different way. She texted her boss, I believe, who is the vice principal of the school, Leslie Hicks, at 3 a.m., quote, "I'm sorry for the time of night message, but my stepfather passed away. Someone hit him with a car while he was walking. I can update you at a later time," end quote. Interesting fact about this scenario, this is how her stepfather died, but he died years prior to this. Now, Letecia resent this message at 4:37 a.m., and Leslie responded at 5:50 a.m. saying, quote, "Oh my goodness, Letecia, I am so sorry. Shall we try and find a sub for you today?" End quote. Now, instead of like a regular person just responding with, "Yes, thank you so much," Letecia replied, quote, question mark, "It's apparent. All my family lives on the East Coast. I'm trying to find a way to get there," end quote. Leslie then says, quote, "Okay, I'm just trying to understand your plan so we can find coverage. Am I understanding that you will not be in today?" End quote. To which Letecia replies, quote, "Yes, it's my parent. I can't believe that would not be an assumption in a time like this," end quote. Leslie, quote, "Again, I am so sorry. I can't make assumptions," end quote. Now, this is just a start. If you don't know anything about this case, you're just getting to know Letecia. And this is very indicative of who she is as a person. We know, at this point in my telling, we know that this is a lie, that her father did not die. Her stepfather did not die, at least right now. We know that her claim is that Gannon was sick, and she was staying home with Gannon because he was not feeling well. Why did she decide to tell the vice principal of a school that she's been working at, I think for like 3 or 4 days, this lie? Dunno. And then while she's lying, she has the nerve to get angry at this woman who she messaged at 3 o'clock in the morning and 4:47 or whatever, very, very early in the morning, these lies. And then she has the audacity to get mad at her. Like, it's just, this woman, she gives no fucks, and she's got some balls on her, some big ass balls, and you will see these balls in action bouncing around. She's got some balls. Now, during this morning, Letecia also notified Al that Gannon was having stomach problems, again in the middle of the night, and that he wouldn't be going to school. Lena did go to school, and there is also CCTV footage that proves that Gannon was alive, at least for most of this day. Gannon and Letecia took a trip to a local Petco. They're also seen arriving home together on some neighbors' camera footage. Letecia said that Gannon was feeling better by the end of the day, and so she allowed him to go to a friend's house between 3:30 and 4 p.m. that day. Now, when he did not return home on time, she called the police and reported him missing at 6:45 p.m. Now, initially, Gannon was treated as a runaway, and the police didn't come to the house until around 10 p.m. Letecia said that he went to a friend's house and then he didn't come home, which is why they believed that he was a runaway. She also made a couple of indications that made it seem like Gannon was getting into drugs and possibly left home on his own accord. First, she showed the police this cigar. I believe it was like a Swisher Sweets type thing. But the type of cigar that you wouldn't really smoke it as a cigar. You would use it to roll a blunt, or at least that's what we did in my day. I don't know what the kids are into these days, but anyway, that's the indication. Letecia said she found one of these in his backpack. There were also text messages where Gannon was asking his parents for bath salts for a friend of his who was older and was asking for them. And this was at the time where that online bath salts, people were doing bath salts as drugs, was happening. That was a thing. Obviously, none of this was true. We will find out. Now, as soon as Al found out what was going on, he flew back home, and Landon also flew into Colorado Springs from South Carolina and stayed at the Stauch home. This situation, in which Landon was staying at the house, caused a huge fight between Letecia and Al. Letecia was being super sketchy right from the get-go. During the trial, text messages were shown between Al and Letecia where she's clearly way more focused on her and Al's relationship than Gannon being missing. That is clue number one. The second very odd behavioral thing that happened was Letecia went to go pick up Al from the airport when he landed, and instead of driving her own Volkswagen Tiguan, she rented a car from the airport. Now, the reasoning she gave for this was that her Volkswagen was a leased car, and she didn't want to put a bunch of mileage on it while out looking for Gannon, as they planned to, go out looking for him. She'd be driving around a lot. Weird, but okay, what is having a car for? But all right. She told Al that her car was parked at the school that she worked at and that a colleague of hers had driven her to the airport. But when Al drove by the school later that day while he was out looking for his son, he did not see Letecia's car there, and that's when he began thinking that his wife maybe knew more than she was saying. Now, what Letecia really did with her car was she drove her Tiguan to the airport, she parked it in the parking lot, and then she rented a car. Soon after, Landon and other family members began to gather at the Stauch home to help look for their missing child. Letecia, she started changing her story a little bit. She told Al that actually what had happened was this. So the candle situation happened, which she admitted to, and so she approached a worker in a nearby housing development for a piece of carpet, hoping to match their carpet, and he told her that he had it and he would come and fix it for her. So she gave him the code to their garage. When she was still out, he entered the home and he lay in wait for Letecia to come home. And when she got home, he attacked her and raped her. And Gannon tried to defend her, but Letecia had been knocked out cold in the process because she fell onto a table. And the man took off with Gannon. Now, this attacker was a Hispanic man named Eduardo. This story was just the beginning of Letecia's web of Casey Anthony level lies. I will start on that web next week. You guys, it's gonna get this episode. It's, not the most exciting or crazy, but it lays the foundation for what we are going to get into, because this woman is, I've literally never, I think she's, I have to say, I do think, in terms of being a liar, I think she's worse than Casey Anthony. And that's saying a lot because Casey Anthony is scum of the earth. So stick around for next week. And if you're following the case, let me know. Yeah, it's a very upsetting one. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Please consider subscribing to this channel. It would help me out a lot. And please stay safe out there because you never know who's knocking. This podcast is produced in collaboration with Lost Line Media. Artwork by August Digital. Music by Matthew